Swim check 1, 2. Bike check 1, 2. Run check 1, 2. I think we're ready. Let's try this. Welcome to the Try Beginner's Luck podcast, a podcast where we explore the sport of triathlon from a variety of perspectives to help beginner triathletes on their journey. I am your host, Mashonda Shines. Welcome back to another edition of Try Beginner's Luck. It's June, y'all. Welcome to almost summer in just a few days. I guess it's after Memorial Day, so it's the unofficial summer to summer, well, whatever. All that really matters is that triathlon is in full swing, and that's what matters the most. And so races are on their underway, whatever. You guys get what I'm saying. And this past weekend, we had a major race in the DC area where a lot of triathletes transition for the weekend and become road warriors or road cyclists and participate in the Armed Forces Classic, where you get to ride around the Pentagon, Crystal City, and depending on how many levels you get around, it depends on the medal that you get. Well, many of you don't know, but I'm into cycling, and I've been going to the series in the Washington, D.C. area, the Greenbelt Racing Series, which is the largest or the longest running race training series in the country. Every Wednesday, 6 o'clock are the females and the males Cat 5, 4-5 or C group. And then at 7 o'clock, you have the males AB. Y'all, I don't have the stomach to actually participate in criteriums or even the training or being in the Peloton, but it is so invigorating to watch. And I'm learning the rules. So I hang out with a couple of USAC officials, and they've given me a role. We'll talk about that a little later. But this gentleman who I get to bring, he's a teammate on Grit, but he's also the founder of a new-ish team called Equip. He is a computer scientist by trade. He's a multisport athlete. He's a model, y'all, like a whole model. Listen, you got to catch him on the Lululemon. If you're in the DC area, he'll be standing up in the stores. He's in the stores. I'm telling you, he's like a whole model. I get to bring to the stage none other than Drew Wilson. Drew, welcome to Try Beginner's Luck. How you doing?
What an intro. Doing really great. How are you?
I'm well. It's good to see you. I mean, I have been seeing you every week for the past couple of Wednesdays.
Right.
And and it's just really cool to see my fellow triathletes out there racing and training, which in turn helps in the actual triathlons. But we got to talk about that, because let me tell you, I'm learning the true cyclists out there who aren't involved in multisport, they be hating on y'all skills.
Yeah.
They hate. Like, I heard about sandbagging last week. They was like, how he gonna come out here talking about Josh, comes out here, runs the C race literally until the final lap. And they're like, he's sandbagging. Like,
Right.
He works with power and watts all the time. Whereas cyclists, well, traditional cyclists and road racing is very different. So we got to get into all of that, because I think there's some benefits into cross-training with the two. And you are a person I've witnessed over the last 2 years who has done it well. Like, you still do up to the half iron distance and you race criteriums. It's a beautiful thing. So let's just get right into it. Drew, you did your first triathlon ever 10 years ago. And then there was a bit of a gap, and then you came back. Let's talk about your journey to multisport world. Take it away.
Yeah. Yeah. So the I guess it is technically my first triathlon ever when I was about 22 or 23 years old. I can't recall, but I was working at a gym. I was a big basketball player. I grew up playing basketball, and I worked in this gym where I got to basically play basketball all day on the side of my job part, which was great. There was this lady there who was a yoga teacher, but also just a runner and all kinds of different fitness things. And in the gym that I worked on, put on this local sprint try. You swam up and back in the pool. You did a little bike loop outside the gym, and then you did a little 5K on the track outside. And she said, "Oh, I think you should try this triathlon. I think you'd be really good at it." I was like, "Yeah, sure." He came back the next week. Did you sign up for that try? I was like, not yet. I didn't know what a triathlon was, if I'm being honest with you. And then a couple weeks later, she said, "I went ahead and signed you up for that try. You're going to do it." And I was like, "Oh, okay. So, well, let's talk about what a triathlon is." Because honestly, I just didn't even know it. And that's when I found out you started with a swim. And I was like, "Oh man, I don't know how to swim. I mean, I could swim, I could float, but I didn't know how to swim." So, yeah, it was really interesting. I did it in a pair of basketball shorts. I swam in basketball shorts. I went to the locker room. I dried off. I changed clothes. I came out on a borrowed bike, did some laps, and then came out and ran, and was just really struggling. I just really struggled. I happen to have some pictures from that time, and you can just see it on my face that I was not an endurance athlete by any stretch of the imagination at that point. But yeah, it was a great experience, and it really just showed me a sport that I didn't know existed. And weirdly, I didn't get back into it until almost 10 years later when I did my second sprint. And that was I trained for that one. I was in by that time I was already running on my own. I'd found running and really enjoyed that. But our friend Marcus from Grit was like really just going like, "Hey, you should try this. You should try this." And I signed up and I got really hooked into it. And yeah, so that's really what it's like, a 10-year gap between those two. I'll say that my time was way better the second time. Somebody told me what a transition was, and I didn't know that was a thing until then. Yeah.
Well, clearly you didn't know the first time around going to the locker room, changing completely what it appears to be like a sprint, and you
Drying
put
off.
on basketball shorts to ride a bike.
Uh-huh.
Ooh.
I also swam in them. I swam in those basketball shorts. So yeah.
Sounds a
Yeah.
little rough to me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yes.
So 10
I wouldn't
years,
recommend it.
I wouldn't either. So listen, if you're listening, do not try that at home, literally. 10 years later, you do your second sprint, and things are different for you. One, how did you get connected with Marcus? Were you connected? Because I know you were also a runner, you had gotten into being an avid runner. So did you guys connect with from running crews, or you just said, "Hey, Marcus, I want to do this try"? Well, obviously he said, "Hey, come do
Yeah.
this triathlon." But like, how did you all get even connected?
Yeah, that's so we started, shortly before the pandemic, just constantly in the same spaces through running, whether it was DC Run Crew or, we would just see each other at the track over at Cardozo just pretty regularly. We just kept running into each other and started talking and that's really how it started. But then he and I kind of put together like I would hesitate to call it a run club, but an event at the at the Lululemon store in Georgetown called Run and Flow, in like mid to late 2019 and early 2020, where we just hosted this open, 3 to 5 mile run followed by followed by a yoga session up in the loft at the Georgetown store, and it just became this really fun thing that we were doing every Sunday, and we started growing this like small community of people around us there, and that's as just planning through that, and became closer and became friends through that. And then the pandemic hit. We started trying to do this over Instagram or whatever, like everybody was doing, trying to host these virtual sessions. And we were finding yogis from like literally all over the globe, just like, hey, can you run a virtual yoga session for us on Sunday? And that's really how it started. We ended up doing like a virtual ultra marathon together in the pandemic. This is like when people were just like, I'm bored, what am I going to do? And we did this Yeti trail runners did a run 5 miles every 4 hours for 24 hours or something like that, which meant you had to like get up at 1 a.m. and run, and then get up at 5 a.m. and run, and then get up at night, just like, anyway, we did that together. And so just through that relationship, Marcus was just like, hey, you should try triathlon. And I was like, oh yeah, that thing I did a long time ago, and before long, I bought a bike, like a road bike, just something. It wasn't anything special, but it was actually the wrong type of bike, if I'm being honest. But something, and started riding it, and started riding with him, and started riding with groups, and tried to learn how to swim, which was not good. I'm still not a great swimmer, but I've come a long way. And it just kind of almost organically progressed into me signing up for that first triathlon. And it was like, I can't even remember when it was, maybe the end of 2021 or end of 2020, early 2021. We were wearing masks for the whole thing. You had to wear a mask in transition. You had to wear a mask on the pool deck, and you pulled it off right before you jumped in. And that's it. That's how next thing I know, I was doing triathlons.
I need you to know how my mind is blown right now. Literally, I feel like you have been doing triathlons for at minimum 5 or 6 years, because I think I just have seen you so much in the social media space that I've thought that you've been in triathlons much longer than you actually really have. And if we're really being honest, the pandemic felt like 5 years in itself. So maybe that's why, granted, maybe that's why. But I'm just like, what? Because wow. Well, welcome. We're glad that you're here. Thank you for all that you do.
Glad to be here.
For the community, because you're community focused. Like, I noticed that, in any group that you're in, you've always been a leader per se, whether it's DC Run Crew or with Grit or with Equip now. Like, you've always been a leader. Has that been your thing? You mentioned being a basketball player, which, it's a whole nother thing we need to talk about. Probably not for this podcast, but for real, I guess that explains it. It's the swag. Like, you and Marcus have this like swag.
Yeah.
Well, for those of you who are listening, and if you know Marcus, Coach Marcus Fitz, there's this bike position that you see a lot of guys who have swag. They ride their bikes, and when they're taking pictures, it's the way they have one leg up. They gotta like lean to the side, and it's like, we did that pose. It was a group of girls. We were out at Cambridge, Maryland, riding one day, and we just said, "Do your best, pretty much Marcus impression." And we all had this like look. It's pretty dope. But it's interesting.
That's funny.
It like this makes sense now. Like, the swag, the energy. You come from a basketball, so you're bringing that baller energy into the sport. Oh, it makes sense now, y'all. I'm having epiphany after epiphany, because I'm like, who's this guy? Like, it's like swagged out, everything matching, socks, the shoes. I mean, like, and the shoes be white, y'all. Like, don't step on his white bike shoes, okay? And if you do, it's like, it's a whole thing. I've seen it. It's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. I mean, we're going to get back to your second first race experience, but the swag of it all, like you're clean when you race. I mean, so much so, like it's like, and don't take any offense to this, but like you're fashionable. Like you care
Mm.
about your fashion, like how we as as how women may be like, okay, we got to go shopping. I feel like you shop like a woman does for your cycling and tri kit gear. Is that true?
I think, I'm going to tie this into basketball a little bit. I was a sneakerhead growing up.
Okay.
And I used to collect basketball shoes. That was the thing, right? Like, everybody's in the same uniform, but did you see my new shoes? You know. But I mean, it's funny. There's like cycling has, I would say, it's definitely a spectrum. I mean, cyclists are also known to look super dork, right? I mean, people are like, yeah, did you see the guy walking around in the tights with all the stuff and whatever else? And cycling kits can also range from plain and mismatch and all and whatever else to like kind of half fashion, right? Right. Like, I mean, you might see some teams that have you know, some really high end design in their kits, and they put a lot of thought into that. And anyway, the white shoes is a whole different thing, right? I mean, that is as much of cycling as it is that you put your glasses over the helmet straps and under. I mean, it's just like these weird things that cyclists do, and not every cyclist wears white shoes and white socks, but some of them live by it. And I guess I'm in that camp. I keep
Yes.
them clean.
Keeps them clean. Okay. And let's just be real too. I think it was probably during the pandemic when, cyclists were coming from out the woodwork left and right that I realized I was one of those mixed matched people and felt really bad because you get called out for it in the streets. Like, really? You gonna wear that Varlo with that what's another brand? That Zoot
Oh man,
cap. Like it's like don't
man,
mix
you're
match brands or you're gonna put on those
yeah,
what are the cycling bibs I have? Uh
Rafa maybe.
mm-mm.
No,
Rafa, that was too it
that's
starts
too
with
pure cyclist, right? That's not the like triathlon cycling brands. Yeah.
right, it's not a triathlon. Anyway, let me just tell you, I would wear triathlon shorts with the cycling bit, like cycling jersey. It was just wrong. I was wrong, and felt so bad because I like to look nice and dress nice, but I don't think
Yeah.
I took my athleticism fashion to pride as I did with what I wore on a daily basis. And I think it's equally important to look good while you're training as well as racing, because I think it all matters to the psyche when you're performing, just like you want to look good and present well in your regular clothes. And I don't think it really stood out to me until 2020 when so many people it became a thing, like a kit mattered.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Look good, feel good, do good, right? I mean, I think what happened for me is I was in the same boat. I just had like cycling stuff is not cheap either, right? I mean, it's so expensive, and I just had my hands on whatever I could get on that I could be comfortable on the bike. And then after so long, I realized like, hey, I'm on this thing like 10 plus hours a week. Like it might as well be functional equipment and like good equipment, and might as well look good while I'm at it. So
Yeah. Well, we've gotten the fashion out of the way, y'all. So just know when you
okay,
see
all
Drew
right.
in the street, if you ain't looking right, he is
Now
the the multi-sport fashion police, y'all. Don't get caught slipping. Don't get caught sighted or whatever he may give you out in the
for my
streets.
man Kwame fashion.
Fashion. All right. So second race sounds like a pool. swim, which was probably
Yeah,
a sprint race, right? So let's go through
right.
that because you said you had the wrong bike. So this is just 2 years ago. You had the wrong bike out for a
Yeah.
race. Let's talk about that first race and what was it like having the wrong bike? And what was it like when you switched over and got the right bike?
Whew. Well, that again is a full spectrum, right? I mean, there's the wrong bike, and then there's an okay bike, and then there's the right bike. I mean,
Facts.
tri bikes are can be a real game changer, especially at the longer distances. I mean, I had I think by this time, I think I had realized I had the wrong bike, and I had purchased an actual road bike for that particular race. But it was still just a standard road bike, and not a tri bike, right? Which was again a whole nother step of getting into that. But yeah, it was a pull swim, which was good for me because I guess it was a super sprint distance on the pull swim, but the rest of it was a full sprint distance. I don't know, but that was really good because I kind of get panicky in the water. And so I did. I panicked in the water then too. I just like stood up in the pool. I was like, okay, I'm okay. um, but yeah, I got out on the bike and I just I think so many things, right? I didn't know how to pace myself. I didn't know how to like what was a good bike strategy. I didn't know that there was a thing as a bike strategy. I didn't, I might have had my transition gear laid out properly, but maybe not. Um, I do recall coming back from the bike just being flat out exhausted. And it wasn't, not a particularly long bike. I can't remember what it was, 15 miles or something like that, whatever the distance is. And I just went too hard, right? I mean, I just laid it out, and I don't. I was going to say lesson learned, but I don't know that I've still don't know if I've learned that lesson because last year's race at the end of the year, I came off the bike and I was like, I can't run. So yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned last year's race, but I want to go back to the sprint.
Mm.
You stood up while you were swimming and you were like, okay, I'm okay. So you knew you weren't going to drown because you could stand up.
Yeah, yeah, yes.
But what techniques have you used? Because again, if this is just 2 years ago and you've increased distances since, what techniques have you used to calm down in the water so that you are
Mm.
more comfortable to not freak out? Because swimming, let's just be real, that's a huge barrier to entry. And a lot of people
Yeah.
don't know how to swim. And even if you are a swimmer, depending on the type of body of water you're swimming in, it can be a little overwhelming. So, what do you do to calm yourself down?
Yeah. I say number one is just immersion therapy, just doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. I mean, even to the point of like just being at the pool and like, and if I, it's probably still this way. Like some days I get in the pool and I do that first 25 or 50, and I come back and I go, whoa, 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 I don't like this. Like my body just is kind of almost in shock. My heart rate's at 1,000. And I'm just like sitting there in the pool and I've only done 50 meters and I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And so, I mean, part of it is that I think I'm like, I refuse to quit in a lot of things. And so I'll just like sit there and I'll just sit on the wall for 5 minutes before I try again. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I've done 200 meters and gone home because I just couldn't get over it. But I say that's one thing. I mean, another thing is like, just I would say going back to the community aspect, right? Like this is one of the things that I think is so great about being on a team, and even better so being on a team of people who are on the full spectrum of triathlon. We have people who are Kona qualifiers, and we have people who are their first time ever racing, ever swimming, whatever, and really having a group of people around you who can provide you both some of the best advice, but also like hear you when you say I'm panicking in the pool, and they go, oh my god, me too, like let's figure that out, or whatever it is, somebody to swim with. Like I think that has been a really big part of what's got me through it is to be able to lean on people like that, both for like technique support, but also like maybe some like emotional support as well. Just be like, no, you're fine. Like mental support, whatever it might be. Like you're fine, right? Like you know how to swim. You can float just by sitting there. So you can also swim whatever distance. And that's like I think that's it. I think those combined together has been what has really allowed me to like get through the hurdle of it. I'm still not a good swimmer, but I've found my way through some of the longer distances now, and can complete it in a reasonable time. So
And reasonable, my meaning before they say it's time.
that's right. That's right. Well,
So,
in last year's race, and apparently this is a thing, and I didn't know this, but they said somebody tossed a bag of Cheetos in the water, and the current took it to the finish line in time before the cutoff. So you had just to be basically you just lay there and you would make time. So that's reassuring.
now, what race is this that you're referring to?
That was Ironman North Carolina, 70.3 last year.
So you've gone from in 2 years the sprint distance to Ironman 70.3. And that's where you didn't feel like you were able to run after the
Yeah.
bike. Okay, we're going to get to that.
Yeah.
Now let's come back to the bikes. Why did you feel that you didn't have the right bike? Because to your point, it is a spectrum, but we tell people try on whatever you have. Why was it so important to you to have the right bike, and quote unquote, what was the right bike for you? Because you never really told us about that. So I just want to find out, what was that
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
bike for you, that you were able to feel comfortable with? Because you can truly do this bike on a hybrid, or you can do a sprint on a
Mm-hmm.
hybrid. You can do a triathlon on a hybrid. Um, but were you trying to perhaps, and hear me out, keep up with the quote unquote Joneses, your friends around you, because they had cool, fancy bikes, and that made you feel some type of way? So you wanted to do that? Like, because I really like, we're having a conversation here. I want to make
Yeah.
sure,
No.
because again, this is going to help somebody. So, like, let me understand what was the right bike for you.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I mean, there's probably some of that, right? I don't know if it's necessarily keeping up with the Joneses as much as you see a tri bike and you go, oh, like you see somebody zoom by you on a thing with a disc wheel and they're an arrow and you're like, oh my God, right? But I mean, I had a gravel bike, so it certainly wasn't the worst type of bike. Gravel bikes are probably better than even hybrid bikes and for a tri or for some road riding, right? You put the right skinny tires on there, put some road tires on, you'll be fine. And yeah, absolutely, you can do a tri on if it moves forward and as a bike, like you can do it. I've seen people do it on some crazy stuff before. You do it, probably a unicycle if you really feel in some type of way. I don't know. Be interested to see it. But yeah, I mean, I've seen people do it on mountain bikes, hybrid bikes, everything in between. One of our teammates did a 70.3 on a still frame bike, and I was just mind blown by her. I was like, that's incredible. Like, that's so long to, but it's doable, right? And for me, I think at that time I had gotten into more road cycling, and I was trying to keep up with some of the faster road cyclists on a hybrid on a gravel bike. I had put some wider road tires on it, but was just struggling. And in retrospect, it's probably as much me as it was more than the bike, my fitness and cycling skills. But I just realized around that time, I realized like, whoa, people do really have these like specialized bikes for this, and it makes a huge difference. And that's when I ended up buying a road bike, just thinking it was like the middle ground. Like, great, I can take this bike on road rides, like group rides and whatever else, but I can also use it very effectively in triathlon as well. And that's just kind of what it was. It's probably a big part of my, sort of obsessive, like detail oriented, where I'm like, oh man, can I go faster if I get this type of bike? Or can I, what happens if I shave my legs? I heard that's really fast, whatever.
All right, and that's how you shaved your hair too, so you can.
Well, look, I will tell you that's the reason. The reason is genetics. but also look, it can serve two purposes, right? I can get rid of like whatever fluff of hair, but also be a little more air at the same time. So
No, I love it. I think, we hear all the myths and, some people try things out just to try them out. But at the end of the day, whatever works for you works for you. And I think that's
really,
mindful and of being mindful that who you hang around in the sport matters too. You can hang out with a group of people who don't really take it seriously, and then guess what? You're going to not take it seriously. You can hang out with a group of people that will challenge you, and you'll be like, "Well, I don't want to just be okay. I want to have a fighting chance and go to the limit." So I think it just matters. And that goes with how you look, what type of bike you have ultimately. But to get into the sport, just get in. Get in how you fit in with whatever
mm,
you have and then grow with the sport. Now, I also want to mention, I think you mentioned, well, I won't want to point out, you mentioned about you were doing more road cycling. How has road cycling helped your triathlon game and or vice versa?
yeah, that's a great one. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, the short answer is if you chase dudes who are faster than you up hills over and over again, you just get faster on the bike. If you just go, I want to get closer next time we do this hill together. Like, I don't want to be that far away from you, or whatever it is, right? I mean, like, it's that's a big part of it, right? I mean, obviously the big differentiator in tricycling and like road cycling is drafting. Of course, there is some draft legal triathlon as well, but primarily that's not the case. And that doesn't necessarily translate. Like the skills of learning how to draft in the field don't necessarily translate to a triathlon, but there are things you still learn, right? Like you learn as soon as that draft goes away, you learn what the wind feels like, and you learn how you don't want that to happen in a tri. So you learn about positioning and all those types of things. And then you also like you definitely learn the balance of sort of like when to place power and when not to. In triathlon, it's about being able to hold that steady power for a really long time versus, road cycling, and particularly in criterium racing, it can be, you might have, 125 watts for, I don't know, 15 minutes. And then all of a sudden you got to go put some 600-watt effort in for a sustained amount of time because something crazy happened in the field, right? I mean, it's just like, it's a wild sport, and the types of cycling there are really divergent. And so when I find myself, what I've learned is when I find myself fully in cycling season, my triathlon or time trialing skills are, they suffer for sure, because I'm fixating on a very like high intensity, shorter distance, shorter time type of cycling, and at the end of the season when I typically try to do my longer tries, I have to learn again a lot. This season I've tried to sprinkle in some time trial racing, just pure time trialing, just as a way of staying in the aero position, getting used to my tri bike and those types of things, and being used to being by yourself out there, which is it's a different animal. I mean, I can sit in a group all day long and just let somebody else take the draft and take a lot of free speed on a tri bike, a TT bike. It's you and the elements only, and you got to figure out how to deal with them, whether that's through positioning, whether that's through whatever it may be. And so anyway, yeah, it's really cool. I mean, just I think the biggest thing is learning. There's so much you learn from being in the field of cyclists, just from watching people's cadence, watching people maneuver, learning how to feel confident and comfortable in your bike with people brushing elbows with you or whatever it may be. I mean, those types of things are just like things that make you way more comfortable on the bike, even when you get on a tri bike and have to take a turn. And we all know tri bikes don't turn all that well. But just learning all those skills and just like general cycling things that come along with being in those groups, and watch people just sprint away from you and you try to keep up. I mean, it's just going to make you stronger if you want to chase that. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff. But really cool.
Yeah, you missed me at the rub up against you. Like, mm-mm, don't come near me. Give me my space, which is why I don't do criteriums. But I love to watch them. And I really love when the Peloton is going by. It's like music to it's like music hearing the Peloton go by. And or yeah, it's like a symphony. That's what it is. It's
Yeah,
orchestrated
I
and
love that.
oh, it's
Love that.
it's amazing. Um,
Sounds even better inside the Peloton. More
you
fun.
know what? Go pro it for me. That's how I'll get to experience it. I'm not sure. I did say I was gonna do green belt one time. I don't know
Yeah,
when, but I will do green belt one time. But yeah, it's that's like I witnessed a
green belt's the best.
crash. Like I witnessed multiple crashes. Let me just say this.
Yeah,
One wrong turn, if the people in the Peloton aren't working together and there's someone perhaps having an off day and they're being a jerk, it really can be dangerous for everyone
yeah,
involved. And so for me, I'm just like, let me be responsible for as much as I can on my own. Because there's even in triathlon races, you can get in an accident if you're not paying attention. You get too like there's things that can happen, but at least I can control it a little bit better. You made a comment about having to train your body essentially for both because you want to do both. So if you're into criterium racing at the time, you have to do a lot of time trial so that you can stay try ready. How difficult is that in the grand scheme of training for someone who might be interested in doing crits? Because a couple of weeks ago, there were a lot of triathletes at Greenbelt. And I was just so shocked, like, oh, is this a thing? So, how difficult is that to go back and forth in between both sports?
yeah. I think it for me it's challenging. My first year, so last year, I was trying to do both pretty consistently. I raced like 30 sometimes last year, which is way too many. But between try and crit racing or just road racing in general, and I was trying to sprinkle in some triathlons throughout there, and just the time spent running, the time spent swimming, and then the time spent trying to, ride a bike in a different way is just like something that to me took me away from trying to get better at riding at the higher intensity. And it's certainly not that you can't do both, but a lot of times your criteriums are 30 to 40-minute races, which means you're going to be pretty much maxed out the whole time as much as you got to keep your heart rate down. That's the idea, but it's full tilt, and that's kind of the idea. I found that once I had become very comfortable with criterium racing, my trying to get on a tri bike and then just stay in zone 3 for 2 straight hours was really really hard to do for so many reasons. I mean, just the positioning and the core strength and the back strength and all that type of stuff of being able to hold the air position is in and of itself a skill and some muscles that you need to build up. But also just like, I would say like a lot of, in a criterium, there's a lot of times where I, strategically find a wheel that I can coast on, and I might not pedal at all for a little bit while my body recovers and whatever else. And in triathlon, you're probably going to be pedaling the bike for the whole 2 or 3 or 4 hours, however long you're on the bike. And for me, that was challenging. It was challenging for me to try and balance both of those, and it's not, I'm getting old now, so like my body doesn't adapt the way it used to those types of things. And so I tried to be a little more strategic with it. I kind of realized it almost this time last year that I was really struggling. I decided, okay, let me focus just on bike racing until the end of the year. And then this year I was very strategic in that, where I'm not going to do triathlon until the final race of the season. And then I will switch and dive fully back into triathlon again. So is it a good strategy? I don't know. It works for me. That's what it comes down to the end of the day. If it works for you, I think I'd say go for it. But it allows me to kind of compartmentalize the two in a way that allows me to do them both because I love them both. But having sore running legs and then trying to race a bike really really intensely was just really hard for me. So
So I was just about to ask you about running legs, to kind of go back to your 70.3 and how you said after you got off the bike, you had no
yeah.
legs. Talk to us about that experience and how did you get through the race?
Slowly. I yeah, I mean, it's disappointing, but things go how they go, and that's just what it is. It's just kind of how we respond to them. But I thought I had trained well, thought I'd prepped well. I obsessed over every detail of transition and every single detail of what power I was going to hold on the bike for that particular reason, etc. And when I got off the bike, it just wasn't there. And when I kind of looked back at it, I kind of I think it was around mile 30 on the bike, my back started to seize up. And I think it was a matter of maybe not great. We had rebuilt the bike quite a bit before then. And so my positioning was different and I hadn't spent a lot of time on it. And, a lot of things that are, what I was alluding to earlier with positioning and strength that you need to build up on the bike in that air position. And over time in that race, my back really just started to cramp up, and my legs started to cramp up, and I still had 20 some miles to go. And so I just kind of pushed through that. Was doing the whole like stand up on the bike, stretch my back thing a little bit, trying to just get through. And I came through and got off the bike, and nutritionally, I felt like I'd done everything right. Like I felt like I had hit what we had pre-calculated my mix for my bottles to make sure I was hitting my targets, and I felt like I'd done that pretty well. But when I got off the bike, I just really was just in so much pain that I started running and almost immediately had to walk, and I was like, oh man, this is gonna be a long day. So I just did a mix of walk running until I got through it. But yeah, it wasn't pretty, but I just kept going until I saw the finish line. And yeah, that's part of why my strategy is a little different this year, with how I'm trying to pepper in some time trialing and just generally more time on the TT bike, but also, one, not trying to build my bike like less than a month before before the race, but just being more comfortable on that bike and spending more time to get stronger on that bike and all those things, so that when mile 30 hits, I still have some in the tank and I'm not falling apart. So
So to your point about not rebuilding your bike, do you have to is there a different build for when you're doing your crits than there is when you're doing time trials versus triathlons? And if so, what is involved with changing that position? Do you have to keep getting refit over and over again?
well, it's two different bikes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I have my road racing bike, which is standard road frame, and then I have a tri bike or TT bike, which is the long aero bars type of setup with fancy aero bottles or whatever whatever else that I saw somewhere on Instagram. Was like, ooh, that'll make me faster.
Instagram
But
will
yeah,
get you every time. Do not look to
they will.
Instagram for your, I mean, look for your inspiration, but
They will. Yeah. But to your point though, I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Your road bike, you kind of sit up a little bit more naturally. Obviously you still want to try to be a little bit aero, but versus the tri bike where you're fully tucked in and laid out, it's just it's a very different position, like a lot more core engagement, and for me, back engagement in that aero position that I just throughout the road racing season I don't spend enough time in, and I'm trying to try to get better at. So
okay, okay. So it's a hard mix because you love both of them so dearly and you've been doing
yeah,
them now equally the same time. I'm going to throw in a this or that question. If you could only do one, would it be triathlon? Or would it be criterium?
I think it's going to have to be Criterium. I think it is. I know it's tough, but I know I feel like this is the wrong place to say that answer.
The wrong place. But we want authenticity. We want truthfulness. We want honesty. I can
Yeah.
handle it, I guess.
There's something about, to me, and I think that's what really just drew me in. Like, Criterium's a little insane. It's nuts, and it's high speed and it's dangerous. You can get better at the dangerous part a little bit. Sometimes you're just going to go down, but there's something about that. There's something about being like at just your max limit, and then seeing the field pull away from you, and you go, I got to figure out how to catch them, although I'm about to snap, or just like taking turns in a field of people at a high speed, or whatever else it may be. I mean, there's something about it that just, I just got hooked on it, and it's just hard to let go. Like, I just want to do it. Like I said, I raced like 30 some times last year. All I want to do is race bikes. Yeah, it's great.
Well, I'm glad you have to find something that you love, but I'm glad that you still haven't pushed try to the side completely, and there's still some space for us, space for
Yeah.
us here. Um, I've been doing a lot of research on crit racers lately with a little project that I'm working on. And I'm finding that a lot of them are swimmers. Do you
Okay.
feel that swimming aids in your cycling endurance?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And for a couple reasons, one easy one for me is the running legs, right? Like, I don't have the running legs, the sore running legs, and then try to get on the bike. I can get that same, sort of endurance type workout. And really, the breath work, I think, is what it is for me. Is it's the ability to control your breathing and control your heart rate in the water. I think is something that is such a hugely impactful thing on the bike. So I see where that makes sense. For me, when I was like really trying to figure out how to swim rather, the breathing was the hardest part, because I'm so used to this like in through the nose, out through the mouth breathing that I've been taught my whole life as a, like athlete or whatever else. And for breathing, it's that real quick, deep breath through your mouth and then the slow out your nose. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't figure it out. But I think, for me, I think like really just forcing myself to undo how I knew how to breathe. And then also probably stretching my lung capacity and all those types of things that come along with swimming was a really big help on the bike, and so it makes sense to me. I can see it.
So get better at swimming, everybody. That's the key.
Yes.
The key is swimming.
Swimming might be my number two now. I came into triathlon as a big runner, found cycling, and hated swimming. But swimming might be my number two now, as far as like what I enjoyed the most. I know, yeah, it's kind of strange, right?
Now, what you mentioned something about, what is it? Something therapy. What did you call it?
Immersion therapy.
Immersion therapy. That's what it was. I was like, oh, that's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah.
What about swimming has made it your number two?
I think part of it was the immersion therapy, just like that I was not good at it. And so I just kept going and trying to figure it out. And I think I was probably doing that as much as I was doing anything else. I was like swimming five days a week plus maybe. And I think when it finally clicked for me a little bit how to swim and not die, I just, I don't know, there's something really calming about it. When you figure out how to like glide through the water properly, and it feels nice, and it's calming, and you get a nice you get out of the pool and you're like, oh, I actually did have a workout. I don't realize I'm sweating. I don't realize that I'm sort of tired, but you really did have a workout. But then I'm not so dead that I can't go ride my bike or go back to work or do whatever else I'm doing in my life. Yeah, I just think there's something really nice about it. I think it's a really interesting sport that I'm still not good at, and I think probably part of it is that I obsess over things that I'm not very good at until I figure out how to just get a little bit better at them. So maybe that's where I am with swimming.
Obsession is good until you get better. Kaylee Slade, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago, said that was her. That's how she got good at swimming, and that's still her weakest of the three sports. But she was able to get her pro card in her first year, and it's interesting because she says, I'm still the last to come out of the water, but she gets to run people down and usually has the fastest run times on the course. And
Yeah,
so I guess I believe in that technique of just keep doing it until you get good at it. That's been my thing with cycling and running because I'm a swimmer. So swimming, it comes a little bit more natural for me, but just constantly doing it to get faster. And you start to see the progressions over time. You don't get as much of a payout as quick as you will with swimming, as you will with running. You do with cycling. If you stay with it long enough, you'll see like your watts start to increase over time. You're like, what? I'm doing this. Running is a little bit different, but yeah, just stick with it and keep doing it, and just don't give up. I think sometimes we feel like when we're not good or we're trying to be at the top of the age group, we lose the essence of what the sport can do for you. And so sometimes just
yeah,
you know, take it in and grow with it and not rush the process of trying to be at the top so quickly. Because if you get to the top so quickly without really fundamentally going through the different uh, learning lessons and challenges,
trials.
yes,
Yeah.
it can have an adverse effect. And so the objective is to be able to keep doing this because you will love it so much that you want to continue to do it, and you want to see the progression um, each time you get out there and do the sport. So just the constant progression. uh, we see all the time progress over perfection. Like, progress, be able to chart that progress, and you'd be like, man, I did this. When you're looking back at your Excel spreadsheet and you see all your times, you're like, been growing. Like, I've been doing it. That's it. Okay. I don't think I've ever mentioned this. Keep an Excel document of your progress, of your races.
Yeah.
That's a true testament to see how you've grown, what you should work on, and how to. I mean, if you don't have a coach, and even with a coach, you can have this stuff for yourself to be like, okay, how do I do this? By the way, do you have a coach, Drew? Because, like, how did you? I mean, it's 2 years in the sport. Do you have a coach?
Yeah, sort of, and sort of not. I mean, I use virtual platforms that work really well for me,
Okay.
and I like some of them because they're adaptable, and my life is a little crazy sometimes, and I can shift things on the fly, whatever else. But I also have, I'll give a shout out to my guy Kerr at VeloFit. He's a good friend of mine. I met him through as a bike fitter, but also he's my strength coach, and probably way more than just a strength coach to me at this point. He's a great dude, and he keeps me running. But yeah, I think, again, going back to what I said before, I highly encourage a coach to everybody if they can. If you can afford it. I realize it can be expensive. There are always alternatives as well. Most smartwatches or whatever else typically have some sort of training plan that you can load into them at this point. Um, I think coaches are incredibly important for so many reasons, particularly for me, tell me to stop when I'm injured or not to do a thing. Not that I listen. Sorry, Kerr. But doing doing those things. I mean, whatever it is, or just bouncing ideas off of, or whatever it might be, is really important if you can afford it. But also, there are so many other resources, including like communities like Grit, right? I mean, every race I've been in, I've run plans through like maybe 4 or 5 different people and been like, hey, how should I do this? Or, how do I prep for this part of transition? And this course is rolling. What do I do? Blah, 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 for, whatever it might be. And, I think there are ways to be successful with and without them. And I think I've kind of found a good balance that works for me with the virtual option and a strength coach on the side, maybe.
I hear that. Strength. That's important. Keep up your strength
Strength,
training no
yes,
matter what.
yes.
And virtual platforms. There's nothing wrong with virtual platforms. Our friends over at Training Peaks have a lot of different plans that you can use. Trainer Road has different plans that you can use. Um, there's a lot of platforms that you can just download a plan. Garmin has plans. If you have the Garmin watch, you can download a plan until, so there's plenty of ways that you can get what you need until you can, upgrade to coaching and things of that nature. Drew, I feel like this was good. It's good to hear the difference
It's
and
great.
have somebody who is out there racing and not just triathlons, but doing the insane, crazy racing in group pelotons like criteriums, because that's a whole different beast. Like, it's a whole different
Yeah.
animal. It's a whole different way of riding. But one thing I will say in terms of the difference between if you're doing crits or time trials or cyclocross, your bike handling skills will be so much more proficient and will allow you to be better in tri races. When things happen and you need to swerve really quickly, you will understand that bike handling skills to be able to react quickly and to react fast. Would you like to add anything to that?
No, that's exactly right. I mean, just your overall confidence controlling a bike, which is underrated. Like, people don't give that enough. Getting a gel out of your back pocket or something like that while you're in a tri, like, those types of things, being able to do that without, if you can do that without coming out of air position, you're saving yourself some time and energy. And being able to control the bike while you're doing all that is so important. That alone is just a skill that you're gonna gain through doing something like that.
For sure. For sure. What would you say? Um, what advice would you give to a beginner who's listening right now?
Now, this is perfect, because I was gonna say this before. We were talking about the whole, what's the right bike or the wrong bike, or do you get a coach or use a virtual platform? To me, it's like, just do it, man. Just get in there and figure it out. Get in where you fit in. Like, I mean, come with a mountain bike and basketball shorts. Do it, right? Like, just you'll figure out that, like, maybe the try is for you, maybe it's not. But maybe you find out, oh man, if I didn't have basketball shorts on, I bet I could have been a lot faster in the pool. And if I hadn't have gone to transition in the locker room, I bet I would have cut about 5 minutes off my time. And you start to learn these things, and like, don't obsess over the small stuff in the beginning. Don't obsess of what your training plan is like. Don't obsess over that stuff. Just do it. And your first time is going to be bad, whether you spend infinity dollars on a coach and all this stuff or don't. Like, you just need that exposure and figure it out from there. Like, don't overthink it. So just do it. Yeah.
I love it. Just do it. All right, we've come to the time in our where we have, rapid fire questions. I almost forgot. I was like, what are we doing now? Rapid fire questions. It's been a
All
long
right.
day, but here we go. Um, what does your go-to workout look like?
Oof. Probably fast laps around Haynes Point.
When you're doing those fast laps around Haynes Point or just training in general, is it audiobook, podcast, music, or silence?
Mm. Mm. Ooh, that's tough. It's actually all the above. It depends on the day. A lot of times it's audiobooks or podcasts. But Other times it's music, but then sometimes it's all of the above. Answer E.
Answer E, all of the above.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. At the end of a race, is it beer, wine, water, or soda?
beer.
You know what? That was such a smart question, Michonne. Do you have a beer refrigerator? I
Always.
forgot.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Why did I ask that question? Well, it's because that's what I
Why? Why else do I work out if I can't have beer?
right. It's like, wait a minute, he has a refrigerator. Duh. Okay. All right. Um, are you a transition minimalist, Goldilocks, where everything is just right, or kitchen sink space hoarder, bring everything out there?
I think I'm pretty minimalist. I think I've got my transition down to a science, and I've got just two small piles, one for the bike, one for the run. I try on the bike to keep most things already on the bike, where that I'm coming out and just putting shoes and helmet on for the most part. And in a run, just taking the helmet on, hat, and running bib and shoes. That's it. So pretty minimal. It sounded like a lot, but it's I listed a lot of things off there, but
But
it
that's
looks minimal in my piles. Okay.
yeah. It's your pile. It's your transition. Um, do you have any race superstitions?
Ooh. Um, I mean, I have checklists, and if I don't go through every checklist like in detail the night before, and probably multiple times, then like I don't know if it's a superstition, but it's just something I'm gonna obsess over. Be like, ooh, did I forget that one thing? Especially when traveling for the race. I don't know if there's any superstitions yet.
I really had a good question like 5 minutes ago, and I should have wrote it down, but I didn't. So I'm going to try to recreate it. What type of criterium racer are you? Are you the meat where you make people chase you down? Are you a sprinter, or are you the strategizer trying to help your team block?
Yeah. I would like to say I'm a sprinter, and that's probably mostly because I'm not the other things. I mean, I'm fairly good at sprinting sometimes in the right situations if I haven't blown myself up, and so I'm trying to get better at that. That's what I'm trying to be. In the higher category races where I probably can't sprint, I try to fill one of those more domestique roles or some other type of where there's just chasing breaks and trying to not let them get away. I'm not good at those, but I'll do it for the rest of the team because I'm not going to be helping out any other way probably. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I shouldn't say the meat. It's the lead out. I need to use the proper name and not
I
the
like the.
inside.
I thought you could say, "Are you the meat or the potatoes?" And I was going to be like, "Ooh, what does this mean?"
Oh, I don't know what potatoes mean. You gotta tell me.
I don't know. I don't know. I was making up new cycling terminology on the fly.
Well, no,
Let's just start saying it, and
you
just
should. Are you the
people will
meat or the
come up with their
potato?
own meanings. I'm carrots today, so I and
Cucumber.
that's it. We'll just let it ride, and then people make up their own meanings for it.
I
Have you
love
have you heard about their strategy? They're like talking about vegetables and stuff. Like, what are they doing?
it. It keeps them strong. Get your vegetables in.
Right.
Okay. And the question that we don't allow people to leave without answering is, do you pee on the bike or take a proper pee break?
This is actually one that I would pee on the bike, but I've never faced this situation. I've never had to do it.
Okay.
I just have never had to go to the bathroom that bad in the race. I think I just like my body shuts down until it's over.
That's fair. That's fair. So we take it you're more of the pee in the wetsuit type at
Yeah,
this
there you go.
stage.
I get it out. I get it out early. Yeah,
Get it out early.
don't swim behind me.
I love it. Y'all, thank you, Drew, for coming on with us. Thank you for being a good sport. Thank you for talking with us about crits and
Of course.
how they can or cannot help or hurt your try game. I think it's important that, sometimes you mix it up, and some of the best athletes are ones that do multi sport. Cut it out, Mashana. That was kind of good. That was 42 at the same time. Anyway, multi-sport in the sense of doing other things, not necessarily multi-sport per se, but you guys get it. Anyway, whenever you try beginner's luck, you always win. I'm Mashonda, and we are out. Peace.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this episode. We need your help so we can continue to try at TBL. So for more information on where you can find and subscribe to this podcast, visit www.trybeginnersluck.com. And don't forget, whenever you try beginner's luck, you always win.